Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining me. I'm Izzy Shashinsky, Izzy's Crafty Bees, and I'm an I am an independent Stampin' Up! Demonstrator from Nottinghamshire. So thank you for joining me on Tuesday for my regular weekly lunchtime live. I'll just say hello as a few people join me, and I'll just wait for a few others. So hi to Sylvia, who's just joined me. I'm just trying to see who else has joined me. I can see somebody has, but I don't know who it is because the name's not popping up. But hello and thank you for joining me. So today I'm going to share with you some cards that I've made using the Sea and Sand suite of products in the January to June mini catalogue. And I've got two cards that I want to share with you. I want to share demonstrating with you, and I've got a third card which will be maybe a bonus card at the end. Oh, hi Alison. Alison, my bestie, has joined me. Yay! Hi. So let's get on. Let me tell you about things that have made me happy since I was last here and you were last with me, which was last Tuesday. So the very next day was my birthday. So I've had a birthday, and I've actually had a birthday week because I'm a bit of a big kid when it comes to birthdays and I do drag it out. But I've had a fabulous time. I love birthdays and we always make it fun in our house. And one of the most fun things that happened on my birthday, even though I was actually working and I was working from home, I got up in the morning, opened my presents and cards, and then I got dressed and went to work in my other office, which happens to be part of my bedroom. And my husband had to go out somewhere. I think he went to buy cake, but he did anyway, went out. And it got to tea break time, and so as he wasn't in to make tea, I got up from my desk and went to go to the kitchen, and he'd put a great big happy birthday or birthday girl banner right across the hallway, and it really made me chuckle, so that was lovely. But the day was just fun despite work, so it was all good. And I had a birthday weekend. Yesterday, as the restrictions have started to ease a little, I had a whole day in the garden with two of my bestest friends, and it was so lovely. We took packed lunches and had a rendezvous in one of our gardens. Thank you, Helen, for hosting. And so I had a whole day with Alison and Helen. Just glorious sunshine. In fact, I've caught sun. I've had to use a bit of calming makeup to actually tone it down a bit. So that was gorgeous yesterday. And on my birthday, the new catalogue, the new annual catalogue, dropped as a PDF. So that was a fabulous birthday present, and it did distract me for a little while in the evening. So anyway, they're things that have made me happy. What's made you happy since we were last here last Tuesday? You can comment below. Please add your comments as we're going through. I won't be reading all the comments as I'm crafting and demonstrating, but I will from time to time just have a little peep and see if anything's cropped up. So let's swing you around. Let's switch this camera around and do the wibbly wobblies. Here we go. This, as you may know, this is my wall of lovely hanging hearts and things. And I had a new heart. Let me just see, I don't think I can see. There we go. This one was made for me for my birthday by Lorna. Thank you, Lorna. Lorna is a member of my team. Let me just swing this round. And maybe at the end of this session, this demo, I might be able to share with you some of the beautiful birthday cards and gifts that I received last week, because I've got so many beautiful handcrafted cards. So let me just, oh, who left that there, I wonder? Gosh. Annual catalogue. I'm not allowed, obviously, to share any of the contents, but I am allowed to show you the cover. So there you go. You've seen the cover. I will be talking to you about retiring products, but today I'm going to share with you two cards, possibly a third card, made using the Sand and Sea Suite products, and in particular the Friends Are Like Seashells bundle, which comprises of a stamp set and matching dies, and I'm going to talk you through these products as we craft along. There's also the most beautiful embossing folder that I'm going to be using. The suite also has designer series paper, which is 12 by 12 inch or 30.5 centimetres squared, and I will share with you the designer series paper, although it doesn't feature in the cards that I'm making. Also in the suite is pearlescent speciality paper, and I did make one card. The first card I made using this suite when it arrived was using the pearlescent paper, so I will share with you that card, although I won't be demonstrating it. And then there are these lovely Opal Rounds. You get 100 pieces of these little Opal Rounds, and I haven't got these yet. I possibly will get a packet. And also some stickers, seashell stickers, which I've not ordered because I'm not really that into stickers, but they're really handy for scrapbookers and just adding some embellishments to your scrapbooking. So let me pop that. So just a reminder, that's in the mini catalogue, January to June. So all of these products are going to be available until the end of June from this catalogue, and I can actually share with you that the bundle, the stamp set, the dies and the embossing folder are carrying forward into the new annual catalogue. I am allowed to tell you that, but the designer series papers aren't. So I'm just going to pop that there into camera shot just for a moment, and just to remind you that if you're shopping with me online, there's a new host code, which is very similar to when you shop elsewhere online, when you're asked to enter a coupon code for a discount. In this case, if you're asked or prompted to enter a host code and you enter this code, then I will actually send you a free gift if your order is over £25. If your order goes over £150, please don't use this code, as you will be prompted to enter items for free yourself, which you can receive yourself. So that's just a little reminder of the host code. I'll try and leave that just at the top of the screen. It may get covered over. So let's have a look at the cards I'm going to show you. They're both very similar, so it's almost a repeat of the stamping and the technique. I've just made one portrait and one landscape. I love the technique that I've used on these cards. I've actually been able to use two different colours of ink. If I hold this closer, two different colours of ink to get a bit of an ombre effect on the seashells. So I'm going to share that effect with you. This one ever so slightly different because I used a two-step stamp on this shell, so I wanted to also share that with you just so that it highlights how the stamp set works. And you can see I've used the beautiful dies and I've used two different embossing folders, so we're quite heavy on technique. So let's have a look. I'm just going to move a couple of bits out of the way. I've got a fabulous show and tell pile that's all my birthday bits and pieces. But one thing I did want to show you before, in case you have to dash off at the end, this is a birthday gift that I received from my friend Donna. She made a lovely gift tag and used one of our mini pizza boxes, which she embossed with the, I think it's the it's not this embossing folder that goes with this, it's the one that looks like underwater sea weed, that's the word I'm looking for. But she's used the stamp set and dies, and she made me a fab keyring, and she actually made it herself using a trinket and sea glass and driftwood that she found on her local beach. She's very lucky to live in Amble in the northeast. So I was really delighted with that. I'm going to just pop that to one side, and I wanted to show you that because obviously it uses the same suite of products that we're using today. So let's crack on. I'm going to use inks. I'm going to use our Blackberry Bliss, Rococo Rose, which is a retiring in colour. I just want to point that out. So that will be disappearing at the end of April. So if you love this colour, now's the time to get it in both ink and cardstock, etc. Sahara Sand and Old Olive. I'm going to use this punch, which is the Story Label punch, which is also retiring. and I'm going to use the Friends Are Like Seashells stamp set, the Seaside Seashells, gosh, that's a real challenge, on the seashore, matching dies, and the matching embossing folder, which I've just put somewhere over here, matching embossing folder, which, whether the camera's going to pick that up, it embosses this really large image, which you'll see when I get to use it. And I'm also going to use the Pinewood Planks embossing folder, which is also retiring. So again, a favourite, one I absolutely love, and it embosses that wonderful wood grain plank texture that I've used for the background. So if you love this, it's your last chance to get it. Okay, so let's just pop those bits. I'm also going to use 2 bits of sponge, just bath sponge that I buy from supermarket or anywhere. I'm going to use a sponging technique. So let's have a look at the card stock. Just pop my cards to one side. I'm going to use Rococo Rose for my card bases. So let's go ahead and trim that, and I'll talk you through, for anyone who's not made cards with me before. Let's have a reminder. I'm going to use my stamping trimmer, and I'm going to cut my piece of A4 cardstock in half. Let me have a look. Yes, actually, to get these two cards from the same piece of cardstock, I did cut it in half. If you prefer your landscape cards to open book style rather than tent style, you will want to cut your cardstock differently. You want to cut it in half long ways. So to get 2 cards from one piece, I'm going to trim it just shy of 15 centimetres. I'm then going to move my trimming blade to the very top out of the way, and I'm going to score at 10.5 centimetres for both card bases. And I am still standing while I'm doing this, just while I get all my cardstock cut. So if you want to make your landscape card opening book style rather than tent style, you want to cut your A4 piece of cardstock lengthways at 10.5 centimetres, and you want to score at just shy of 15 centimetres. And that way you can have your landscape card opening on the hinge like a book. Oh, hello, I'm just going to say hello to Sheena as I'm still standing. I can see Sheena's joined us. So, hi Sheena, thank you for joining me. So, let's just pop that cardstock to one side. I'm going to make 2 white layers that I'm going to be embossing with the wood planks embossing folder. So I'm just going to take a piece of white cardstock, an A4 piece, and I'm actually going to cut that down to just have a look, turn it around landscape, and I'm going to cut that down to 14 centimetres, and then I'm going to trim that down to 9.5 centimetres. I may have done that 10 on my originals. Let me always double check. Yes, I actually did do it 10. Sometimes I take off a centimetre all around, and sometimes I take off a little bit less. So in this case, I did 10 centimetres by 14 centimetres. I'll get rid of that little scrap. And these 2 pieces are going to be the embossed white layer. I've then got the other half a sheet, which I'm going to just chop down to 10.5, and that will allow me to actually do the die cutting and stamping, which will become apparent. So let me pop my trimmer to one side just for the moment, and I'm going to take a seat and we're going to get stamping and crafting, creating. So let me just pop that there, and let's have a look. So let's open up the matching dies first of all. So this die set is fantastic. It comprises these little dies. I'm going to let me just pop my card base, and then you can see that a bit clearer. So it has one big die. This is something that I think Stampin' Up! Are moving towards, these really great large dies that cut out several different pieces or in this case, as you'll see, it comes out as one big piece, but I'm going to trim it down. Also in the set are this roundish die, which coordinates with this image. Now on the front of the stamp set case, the images are often shown at 100% or full size. In this case, there's a little, some words at the bottom, quite small. Image is shown at 75%. If we open up the set, we can see we get quite a lot of stamps. In fact, we get 23 stamps, really good value. So we can see that this die matches this image. We get a die that matches this seaweed image. Let's just pop that down. We get a little shell that matches this little shell image here. Another die that matches another piece of seaweed that's on the other set. There we go. Another little piece of seaweed and a starfish that coordinates with the starfish stamp. So fabulous. Really big stamp set. I'll just pop those single ones back. Really big stamp set, some really nice sentiments as well. Happy birthday, you've got a happiness, I'm so happy I found you, wishing you the very best. You are unique and completely amazing. For you, love you to the beach and back, I absolutely love that. Thank you. Friends are like seashells, you collect them along the way. And I must say that I am a beach comber. Whenever we go to Norfolk, I comb the beaches, I bring back seashells, I have them all over the place. My light poles in my bathroom are seashells from the beach in Norfolk. So yes, I do collect things. Now I'm going to run this die through my Stampin' Cut and Emboss machine. I'm going to bring my big machine across. I'm going to run it through twice. So it's a whole suite of products. I'm just going to make my sandwich. I need 2 number 3s, and look at the nice dirty plates, really well used but working perfectly. I've actually just cleaned both of these plates using the lint roller, and it just pulled off some of the little bits of cardstock. So if you're getting little bits of cardstock when you're die cutting, there we go. That was quite a fun trick because it was leaving lots of little bits of black as I've been die cutting some black cardstock. I'm just going to get rid of some of these bits and just pop those in the bin. I'm going to do this twice because we're actually making 2 cards. So let's go through a second time. And I thought by making 2 cards that are pretty much the same but different. Oh, did anybody notice my new pinny? I had my new pinny on. And on the front of it, it says, Izzy, same but different. Because it's my catchphrase. And my best friend, Alison, made the pinnies. She's very clever. Sorry, I'm just concentrating on getting rid of some of these bits and pieces. She's very clever, and she has a fancy machine that can do cut vinyl, and she's bought herself another fancy machine that can actually heat the vinyl, a heat press, so she can now do heated vinyl onto fabric. And so I commissioned her to make some pinnies. So there we are. We've used the big die and we've cut this entire image. So I'm just going to pop this out. See how lovely it pops out. We'll just take our time and we'll pop these bits of scrap out, and then these other little bits we can just run our fingers through and get rid of these little tiny bits, and they pop out nice and easily. If you do have a die brush, you can use the die brush whilst the die is still, the paper is still in the die. Use your die brush. I find that if you use your die brush when the paper is out of the die, you can sometimes just tear the paper. It's a little bit too rough, but these little bits do pop out really easily. So yes, I've just noticed, I think, while I was standing up, Katie's watching. Hi Katie, thank you for joining me. And it is a great tip, using just an accidental thing that I was tidying up. Found a lint roller and thought, oh, I could use that. And it's really handy when you've got all these little bits on your desk. How easy is that? It's become my new best friend, I can tell you. So now we have these two fabulous pieces, which we're actually going to stamp. So if I bring my original cards back in, we're actually going to stamp after we've die cut. So, because this is a photopolymer stamp set, we can't stamp before we die cut because we would never get the images in the right places. So now we've die cut, we know that they're going to be in the right place. And I'm just going to check that I'm actually on screen. Yes, I am. That's good. I like to just check which area of my desk is on screen, because every time you go live, the camera ends up in a slightly different angle. So let me just see what will fit on which block. So I've got myself a block D here. And I'm going to go for this big conch shell and just remind myself if that fits. Yes, so the big conch shell fits a block D. I'm going to go for this one. Don't know what that one is. That will also fit a block D. And I'm going to go for the small one. So I'm using a collection of 3 shells. And if you remember when I've talked previously, when you're designing a card and pulling together a composition, if you can work in groups of 3, it's usually much more interesting to the eye rather than an even number. An odd number is often best. I could go 5 and stamp these other two little images as well. So I'm going to bring in my Stamp and Pierce mat, because we're using photopolymer stamps which don't have the sponge layer between the actual stamping layer, the rubber layer, and the block. So we need to give it some cushioning. So we're going to cushion it using our Stamp and Pierce mat. And now we're going to have a look at doing some technique stamping. So I'm going to start with this big conch shell, or round spiral shell, let's call it. So I'll just move those to one side a little bit. And I'm going to stamp the image using Rococo Rose, and I'm also going to give it some definition with Blackberry Bliss. So I'm going to get my Blackberry Bliss ink pad, and I'm going to place my sponge just on top of it so that when I'm stamping I remember which ink pad to put which stamp in. So I'm going to actually ink the stamp with Rococo Rose all over. And now I'm going to just pop some ink onto the sponge, and I'm going to just sponge around the edge. And you get a different result each time you use this technique. So it's one of those fab techniques to use, and it's always same but different, which I love. So let me see. So we can see exactly where we want to put our stamp because we're using photopolymer. That's a great thing. And we're going to put some pressure and just wait for the ink to make good contact with the cardstock. And we've now got that slightly two-tone image. So if I just hold that up, it's not very pronounced, but it's just slightly two-tone. It's a really lovely, subtle kind of technique to do. So let's go again with the second. While we've got the ink out, let's go with our second one. So I'm going to ink that up again. Now if you're worried about contamination, I suggest that you clean off before you go and stamp again, or you could stamp off a few times onto some scrap. To be honest, because we're the same sort of colour shade, we're not going to contaminate the Rococo Rose ink pad too much. So I've inked the stamp pretty well, and I'm going to now add that Blackberry Bliss all the way around the edge. The other way of doing this technique, where you just get a two-tone effect, is you can actually kiss your stamp to your ink pad. You can sort of go round like this and just pick up the ink on the edge. I find I get a harsher line when I do that, so I'm just going to concentrate my Blackberry Bliss a bit more, and let's see if we can get a more pronounced. You can use a sponge dauber as well if you don't have little bits of sponge. If you've got some daubers, let's try and get a more pronounced version this time. There we go. And here we go for stamping. Let me just try and get that angle right. Oh, isn't the weather lovely? My craft room's so warm today. There we are. That's maybe a little bit more pronounced than the first one. You can maybe see that two-tone. I hope it's coming across on the camera well, because in real life that's a really nice two-tone effect. So let's go with the next shell, and for this one I'm going to use a different colour. I'm going to use Rococo Rose for my second colour, but I'm actually going to ink the stamp with Sahara Sand. So I can close up my Blackberry Bliss ink, I can pop my Sahara Sand, and I can pop my sponge on my Rococo Rose this time. That just stops me from going in there and inking up. So I'm going to ink up this shell using Sahara Sand, and I'm actually going to stamp off, I think. I can't remember whether I stamped off. I think I might have stamped off and then inked with Rococo Rose around the edge, and this is even more subtle. Let's see what we get. Because I've stamped off, I'm going to huff on my stamp and just re-moisten that Sahara Sand. And let's see how that stamps. There we go, we've got a nice two-tone effect there with that blush of pink around the edge. So I'm going to go ahead and bring my second piece in. This is a bit like production line stamping. And my Sahara Sand ink pad is quite juicy, so that stamping off is quite helpful. But of course it's all a matter of taste, and if you want a darker image, then I just encourage you to play around with this technique. And of course with different stamp sets as well, you can get some really good results with flower stamps using this technique. So I'm just taking a moment to line that up, and some nice even pressure across my stamp. No rocking and rolling, I don't give my stamp a wiggle. I just simply allow good contact between the stamp and the cardstock to allow the ink time just to make contact and penetrate. So we've got another nice pretty result there. Now you'll notice a slight difference between this shell and this shell, and I just want to point out something. Is this stamp set is a two-step stamp set. It's just so very small writing at the bottom, and you can see these images here, and they're designed to work with the shell. So I'm just going to pull that one out just to demonstrate what I mean. So this one is designed to work with this shell, and it's a very loose sort of watercolour almost wash type image. So I'm going to stamp it full strength on my scrap paper, so just so you can see. So if I just stamp that full strength, you'll see it just makes a sort of watercoloury wash, a splodge I'm going to say. Now if I stamp it second generation, you'll see I've got a lighter, and it's just a nice way of adding colour without having to do any other fancy techniques. So as I've stamped this one on my scrap paper full strength, I'll now just stamp off and stamp on using this, and you'll see that it actually just adds colour to the body. So let's just go ahead and do that on, actually let's use a piece of, instead of scrap, let's use a proper piece of basic white, and then I can just show you the difference. So if I stamp the shell full strength in Sahara Sand, and we've already got this lovely two-tone effect. Now if I stamp the swish or the splodge off and then stamp it second generation over the top, you'll see that it adds colour. Now if I do this in a different colour So if I use the two different colours here, I'm just going to bring my chamois in. And the reason I wanted to just take a bit of time to demonstrate this is so that if you do invest in the stamp set and you're a beginner or a reasonably new stamper, you'll get the idea behind the two-step stamping. So I've stamped in full strength Sahara Sand. Now if I go in with my swoosh or my splodge in Rococo Rose and I stamp full strength over the top, this should highlight it. And these images are designed to roughly match the image, not completely match the image. You'll see that they actually don't go right in the lines. They're supposed to be used as a watercolour effect. So what I prefer is a full strength image, and because this has already been stamped once, give it a huff and then stamp again, and you get that sort of paler colouring in effect, a bit like a watercolour wash. These are also really useful for adding background colour behind an image. So you could use it almost as a watercolour background, and you could use it the opposite way around. So you could actually use it on a card and you could make a kind of ombre effect, watercolour background, and now you could stamp a different image over the top, or even add a die cut piece over the top. So really versatile. And I just wanted to, I hope you don't mind me taking up a bit of extra time, wanted to just spend a little bit of time explaining how to use and how to get maximum use out of your stamp set. So this one this little stamp, this is the last one I'm going to stamp, so I'm going to stamp it in Sahara Sand, but again I'm going to use my sponge and Rococo Rose, and I'm kind of going to do a half and half. Instead of going around the edge, I'm inking the pointy end of the shell, and I'm going to go in and stamp our die cut piece, and now you can really see that sponging coming into its own with the two-tone colours. Now what I want to do with these images, now I've got them stamped, I'm just going to line my inked stamps just to the side of me so I don't pop my elbow in them. I'm going to just close up my ink pads for the moment. Now what I want to do with these three images, as they're the key images I'm going to use on the card, is I want to free them and release them from this large die. But before I do that, I want to actually give them some definition. So I'm going to go ahead and use the embossing folder that comes in the suite, and this is where it gets really clever. So if you, by placing your die cut piece in the embossing folder really carefully without trapping your whole thumb, really carefully, and I'm going to bring back in my machine. We're now going to emboss, and you'll see this, the images really come to life. So this is a 3D embossing folder. I'm going to use platform and plate number 4, and I'm going to always enter hinge first. And as I'm standing up to do this, I'm glancing at the screen and I'm going to say a quick hello to Brenda for joining us. Thank you for joining us, Brenda. Don't worry about being late. If you missed anything at the beginning, you can always go back and catch me later on Catch Up. And now I'm going to bring this up to the camera and just hope that the light catches just the detail. If I move it around in the light should catch the detail of that embossing. It really does give some fabulous texture and dimension to the die cut piece. And where's my second one? Did I bury it? What have I done with it? Oh, it's here. I was hiding it. I actually had it in my hand and I was hiding it underneath the platform. So I'm going to do that a second time. So you can see it lines up really well. And if you always remember to have your Stampin' Up label to the top, you'll always get your embossing folders in the right way up. Let's pop that top plate on and run that through. super. There we go. Oh, sorry about the crashing and banging. So now we've got 2 pieces the same, and we can go ahead with our snips and we can free these little shells. Of course you can make beautiful cards using the full set, and I do have one that I made earlier that I will show you at the end. And I'm just going to untangle my snips, but what I'm going to do now is very simply free the shells from their base, and once you've embossed them it's really easy to actually free them off. Now I'm just going to double check. I think on my original I actually left, yes I did, I actually left these little pieces of seaweed attached to the shell, which I'm going to colour. It's really quite quick and simple just to whiz round and free these. I'm loving this system of having, it's the same as the butterflies. We've got one big stamp for the butterflies and we've got one big die. So it's the same but different. We've got one big die but lots of little stamps for the seashells. So let me just quickly free this big shell. So it's kind of fussy cutting made easy really. Bit of fussy cutting going on there, and I'm going to keep these pieces with the seaweed on. I'm going to get rid of the little tiny bits. I'm going to keep those bits with the seaweed on just to one side for the moment, and I'm going to go ahead and do the same for the second set. So I know Alison's watching, so Alison will love this because this really is fussy cutting made easy, and I know you're not a massive fan. Fussy cutting's like Marmite way, they love it or hate it. I love a bit of fussy cutting, and some people hate it, and some people hate it for really valid reasons, you know, dexterity. I don't know, Alison, my best friend, is left-handed, so without a good pair of left-handed scissors it can be a trickier thing to do. But we struggle for our art, don't we, Alison? We do struggle for our art. Let's just get rid of those scraps. So now I've got my lovely 3 sets. I'm going to pop some colour onto the seaweed, and for that I'm going to bring in a little scrap pad. I choose when I'm doing my videos to use scrap pads rather than my grid paper wherever possible, just because my camera doesn't always like the focusing and refocusing on the grid sheet. I think it thinks the plank wallpaper is enough. So I'm just going to bring these pieces back in, and I'm going to do a very quick, I'll just free those and it's a bit easier, a very quick colour. So I'm going to use Old Olive, squish some ink into the lid, a bit of grotty water in the bottom of my jam jar. Gosh, that's really disgusting. That is ink, and it's not what is it, mould or lichen or anything. I'm going to use have a look, a watercolour, an aqua painter. So I'm going to use this one. This is one of the new ones. That's really disgusting that I didn't bring some fresh water. I always have this jar on my desk. And I'm going to make this ink in the lid really watery. Is that still on camera? Can you see what I'm doing? Yes, you can. So really watery, and I am going to really quickly just add a watercolory wash over the whole of the seaweed. I'm not even thinking about it. I'm not thinking about adding different tones, light or shade, because this is seaweed, and naturally by just going over it you will get a variation in tone. Just add that colour, and of course remember this is basic white cardstock, which isn't designed necessarily to take on water. If you scrub too much with water it will bobble and you'll get bobbly bits on your cardstock. So don't think about this, just add the watery ink. So this is a technique, no technique. No. Let's just keep going. Make it really quite watery, but then don't waste any time, just add it. There we go. So, have we got any comments? What's made you happy since last week? I know my demonstrator friends who've joined me will be saying new catalogue, new catalogue, new catalogue. It's so exciting. Of course, thinking about new catalogues, so if you're not a demonstrator and you're a customer, we have the new demonstrators have the new catalogue in advance so that we can see what's retiring and plan our events, and it's a perk of being a demonstrator at the end of the day. So thinking about retiring products, every year some products retire entirely and are never seen again. So when we say retire, we really mean retire. I think I've only ever known 1 or 2 items come back, and the is it the Hey Chick stamp set this year was one example, but in 9 years of demonstrating, oh, I forgot to do these little bits, come back. In 9 years of demonstrating, I've not known any retired items actually make a return visit. So let's just go back. So when we say retiring, we mean retiring. So if you've got favourites and you've seen now already the retiring list because it's published as last chance products in my online shop, if there's an item on that list and you have to have it because you love it, get it now, because once it's retired it won't come back, and you will be spending your time, instead of crafting, trawling eBay or trawling stamp sets that have retired, Facebook pages, asking who's got it because you didn't get it when you could have. And who's got time for that? You want to be crafting. You don't want to be looking for second-hand goods. Many of the items that are retiring are discounted at the moment, and some are not discounted. But like I say, get your favourites before they're gone, because once they're gone, they're gone. So now we've added some colour to our seaweed. We're now getting a collection of components for our cards, so I'm going to pop them all just to one side. All of those bits and pieces just to one side, and I'm going to bring back my 2 layers, and I'm going to bring in the Stampin' Cut and Emboss machine again, and the embossing folder, which I've just buried. Here we go. Pinewood Planks embossing folder, and we're going to emboss those 2 layers. Now this one is a different sandwich, and you'll see that I've written on hinge forward to remind me, plate number 1 and plate number 3, or platform number 1 and plate number 3. Now you need to decide which way you want your planks to run, and I've put my portrait card in with the planks, all the planks running horizontally on both cards, I should just say. So this one's going to be for my portrait. So platform 1 and plate number 3, and we'll just whiz that through so quick. I'm just going to move my jar of water before that goes somewhere it shouldn't. So number 1 layer, and this, I am so sad that this embossing folder is going. I've used it so much. So this time I've put my layer in landscape, and I'm just going to alter that because it's not very straight. I'm actually going to pop it right up against the hinge and run that one through as well. I'm really, really sad. This has been with us for a few years now, and I have used it so much on lots of projects, home decor projects, as well as card projects, and it really is one of my favourites. I'm really sad to see this go. I'd hoped that it would be carrying over. Oh, I'm just being cheeky. I'm just having a quick glance while I'm standing. Alison's been searching for a big pair of scissors. Okay, so now we know what's on the birthday list. We shall have a search. Okay, so now I've got my two base layers and I've got my base cards, and we can go ahead and start to do some assembly, and then all that will be left to do will be to stamp our sentiments and maybe have a think about whether we want to add any embellishments. I haven't added any embellishments at all to my original cards, so I'm going to start by sticking the base layers down, and I'm going to go for multi-purpose liquid glue. As always, my preferred glue, particularly for large pieces like your first layer, because you get that wiggle room so you can really line it up. If you use a tape glue, once it's made contact, and it's very difficult to get out of any misalignment, whereas with multi-purpose liquid glue you do have a moment of wiggle room. And just to mention that glue does behave differently in different temperatures. So today it's quite warm. It's particularly warm in my craft room because it faces east and I get all the morning sun for the whole morning, so it gets quite warm in here. And so when you're using multi-purpose liquid glue, it tends to cure or go off quite quickly in the heat. So we've now got our bases. Now the way I assembled these cards, when I'm assembling lots of different pieces, I tend to lay them out first till I'm happy with the layout, and as I've obviously done this one before, it's going to be fairly quick to do this time. Now I can see I've left this piece of seaweed on, and I actually want this shell to be pointing that way, so I may trim this little bit off the bottom for the landscape card. Let's just go ahead and do that. We'll just get rid of that bit. We might use it, and we'll just get rid of that bit. So yeah, I just kind of roughly lay them out in the order I want them to be. And for this one I popped that one down there, and I filled this space with my sentiment here. So I'm pretty happy with that. And what I do always do is think about which elements want to be up on dimensionals and which elements are going to be stuck flat. And I mostly will start with the element that's popped up on dimensionals and then poke the other elements behind. And look at me, I'm still in my little pot of graveyard dimensionals. I'm still not cracked open that new pack because I'm determined to use these up. So I'm going to pop this large shell up using dimensionals, and I'm just going to chop in the edges. Oh look, luxury, I've got a full dimensional there. I'm going to stick the dimensionals fairly close to the centre, so I've got some space to actually poke some of that seaweed behind, and the other shell over here. I'll pop a dimensional in this corner, so I'm thinking about placement all the time. And you don't need too many dimensionals either. Actually probably only need a couple of pieces. So let's go ahead and pop that. And you can see just the difference in colours that I've got this time using that technique. In fact, I've definitely used a different colour on that one, and I've used the same colours as I've used today on this one here. So now I'm going to stick my large pointy shell, and I'm thinking about this is it's a natural. If I'd have popped these shells down on the surface, it wouldn't have landed standing right up like that. It will have landed sort of like this. So I'm going to stick this one flat. I'm going to use some Tombow again. just a wiggle. Ooh, and just poke that under there. And this one is half on, half off. So for this one I'm going to use a dimensional on the pointy end and a bit of Tombow on this flared end. I nearly said frilly, but it wouldn't be frilly, would it? Being a shell, I'm going to go for a tiny mini dimensional just on that pointy end. I'm going to say hi to my mum, even though I know she's not watching live, because I know she'll be watching on catch up. So hi mum, and she's got a very good and valid reason for not watching me live today, because of the restrictions lifting slightly. Her art club is actually meeting outdoors, or as the proper artist would say, en plein air, to do some painting, which is really lovely. So I'm keeping this piece here. So hi mum, hope you're enjoying this, watching this back later. And I know you haven't got this stamp set and dies, but they are in the January to June catalogue, and they are carrying over into the annual, so you've got over a year to decide whether you love them or not. So I've just stuck them in. Now I've stuck the seaweed down at the base of it. I've not stuck it down at the top, so it sort of gives some texture. And I'm just snipping these pieces off as I go along. Popping a bit of seaweed behind there. And I think that this just finishes off the card with that pop of extra colour. So I'm happy with the image work on this card. Let's work on the second card, and then we'll work on some sentiments. So let's have a look. I'm going to use the same techniques as I did for this card. Let's bring the original in. So I'm going to start with the big shell and pop that up with dimensionals. So I know that I want to stick this shell behind, so I'm actually going to think about putting my dimensionals in the centre. I want to also stick some seaweed towards this side, so I'm going to pop some dimensionals underneath about here and in the centre, so towards the bottom here and in the centre. So let's see what I've got on this piece of graveyard dimensional packet. Ooh, I can feel a new packet of dimensionals coming on very soon. So let's pop that about a third of the way up, leaving some space here for the sentiment. Now this time I am going to stick my pointy shell behind, and I am having it pointing straight up because for this one I'm imagining that these are actually under the sea, and it might well be laying that way up. Okay, so I'm going to put some liquid glue behind and poke that behind there. And I'm going to have this little shell down at the bottom, but I'm going to stick that on last because I want to pop my sentiment on before I do, and then I'm going to finish off with some more seaweed behind my sentiment. But before I do that, I'm going to use this sort of grassy seaweed. It's probably sea kelp. Now Katie, if you're still on, I'm going to ask you, have you been to the Deep? Because I know it's quite near where you live. You must have been there with your children when of course it was open. It's such a fab place to visit. I really love the Deep. But I can tell you a funny story about the North Sea tank, because you go into the Deep and you're looking at all the lovely tropical fish to start with in the shallow tank, and then you work your way down some stairs, and at the bottom of the stairs there's the North Sea tank, and it's the cold water tank. And standing at the bottom of the stairs were these two lovely old ladies, handbag over the crook of the elbow, gazing into the depths of the murky North Sea tank. And one old lady turned to the other old lady and said, what's that? As a big fish swam past. And her friend said to her, I think it were a cod. I'm sure it were a cod. And her friend turned to her sharply and said, a cod? A cod? You mean like the cod that we get in the chip shop? She says, yes, a cod like we get in the chip shop. And she said, ooh, excuse language, blummy neck, ooh, I'm not having one of them again. They're ugly looking, beep beep, aren't they? And then off they walked. Well, I was in hysterics. I was absolutely in hysterics. They just made me laugh. And I always remember that now. And I never order cod in the chip shop. I always order haddock. Oh, but that's a different story. Right, we're going to do some sentiments now. So I'm going to go with friends are like seashells, you collect them along the way, because I think that's just so adorable. I'm going to pop that on a block C. And I will just follow my original with that small for you. Or shall I go with thank you? I might just go with thank you for a change. I need so many thank you cards. I do get through them. I send a thank you card with every order that I get, so it's always nice to make them. So I'm going to stamp the sentiments just straight onto this piece of white, and I'm actually going to use my Sahara sand. Just a reminder that we don't always have to stamp sentiments in black ink. So I'm going to search for the missing punch. Oh, it's just here. And I'm going to punch that one first using this story label punch. Again, another one I'm really sad to see retiring. I do use this punch quite a lot because I like the curves on the punch. It's really organic. And I'm going to stamp my thank you just down here. Just close that ink pad. I don't know about anybody else, but I'm a monkey for popping my elbows in. And this one I'm going to try and just punch in a slightly different way. Let me just free that from this big piece. Let's just pop that to one side. I'm just going to try and see whether I can punch that in a slightly different way. That's what I do like to do. If you feed your sentiment from the top and turn it round a bit, let's just see what sort of shape we get. Ooh. I'm going to have to do that again. Let's go upwards. So sometimes you have to feed it in from the side and then turn it round. Let's just see. I wonder what kind of shape we might get with that. There we are. And we get the cute little shape. So sometimes it's worth having a play around with your punches. And again, it's all about getting value and versatility out of your products. And the reason I've not used the circle punch is because I hadn't realised I keep my circle punches for punch art for children's cards, and I hadn't realised that this one was a 1-inch circle punch which had already retired. And I have to say that all of our circle punches are retiring this time, so if you're a fan of circle punches and don't have the ones in the current catalogue, now's your chance to go and get them. So let's finish this card here with this smaller sentiment. So I'm going to pop the thank you just slightly underneath the point of this shell. So I'm just going to use Tombow on the back, just a squiggle. And I think I'll just try and pull that down lower. So taking care not to protrude beyond the bottom of the card base. Pop that thank you there. And for this card, I'm going to pop my sentiment across here, and I'm going to pop a sentiment under this corner and some Tombow under the back of this top side. Now, just to take care, oh gosh, I am getting down to the bottom of my graveyard. So just to take care, I'm going to put my finger and thumb on the corner I want my dimensionals, because sometimes when you flip over a shape that's the same, you can confuse yourself. So I always just take care to pinch the piece on the corner that I want my glue and turn it, and then I know that I'm putting my dimensionals or my glue on the right side. Now I know that I'm going to do it on the opposite side, and because I've turned it this way, I want to actually put the glue on the bottom, because when I flip it, it'll be on the top. Now I know that that sounds like I'm dumbing that down as a description of demonstrating, but it's amazing just how your mind just forgets what you're doing sometimes. And I'm going to repeat the same kind of thing. So I want some liquid glue under this side, but a dimensional under this side. So I'm going to pinch finger and thumb where I want my dimensional, flip it over, finger and thumb there. So I want my dimensional in this corner. Let's pop 2 of those tiddlers. And I want my glue, my wet glue, along the top. So if I turn it back, I want it along the top underneath. So I've turned it this way, my glue along the bottom as it's upside down. And actually some people struggle with reversing images and reversing things. It's not a malfunction of the brain, it's just a struggle. It's just that seeing things in mirror image is difficult for some people. So I'm going to finish off and fill in this white area with the remains of my seaweed. And again, I'm just putting a bit of wet glue on the bottom of it so that the rest of it can actually remain sort of loose and free. And you can see, you actually get, if I just turn my card around, you can see that this adds texture and texture and movement to the card. So here we are. Same but slightly different, and same but different. 2 pretty cards. Now if we wanted to embellish these cards, what could we use? We could use pearls from the sea. I think that's quite nice. There are those opal accents that are in the catalogue. We could use those. We could use a little bit of ribbon, but I wouldn't go too mad. I've chosen to leave them just as they are, without any further bling. We could use sequins as well, just for a bit of shimmery underwater type of effect. That's the word I'm looking for. Goodness me, I think I must be a woman of a certain age because my words are failing me today. So I have got, and I've been on just an hour, I have got a second bonus card to share with you if you can spare the time to stay with me. Let's just pop those to one side. This is the card that I want to share with you. It's a smaller square card, and it's actually 10.5 centimetres by 10.5. And the reason I chose that size was because one width of A4 is 21 centimetres. So I just cut it down to 10.5 and scored at 10.5. And I actually found some square envelopes online. They're a little bit bigger, but I quite like them. They're quite nice. And I stamped the envelope in muted tones. So I'm going to share with you how I made this card if you can spare the time. And I'm just going to glance, see if I've still got viewers. Yes, I have. Yay. So if you want to stay with me, you're very welcome. And I'll share this extra bonus card. So I'll just get some materials out and show you what I'm using. So of course it still features the stamp set we've been using, but we're going to pick up some different images from the stamp set. I will use some of the dies to die cut as well, and some extra techniques, some embossing on the background and some stitched dies as well. But I've gone ahead and pre-cut my base card in white. That's here, so that's the 10.5 centimetres, scored at 10.5 centimetres base card. I've gone ahead and cut a piece of crumb cake cardstock, which is one of my favourite neutrals, and I realised I haven't used it for quite a while, and I've cut that at 10 centimetres by 10 centimetres. I've then got a piece of vellum, which is 9 centimetres by 9 centimetres, a further piece of white, which is 7 centimetres by 7 centimetres, and then I've got some scraps of white which I'm going to use for stamping. I've got one of our gold hoop accessories, and sadly these are retiring. These are in the annual catalogue currently. And let me just refresh my memory in terms of how many you get in a pack. Just going to try and carefully get my annual catalogue. Let's have a look. It'll be around here somewhere. So here we are, gold hoop embellishments. You actually get a pack of 10 for £7, and I've really enjoyed using these. I've got one left from my original pack of 10, and I just really like, it's just a really pretty embellishment, so I'm going to use that. So let's go ahead, before we do anything else, and do some stamping, because I have a little bit of a technique just to show you in terms of colour. So I'm going to get the sand dollar, I believe these are called. Oh, and I just need to take some of the other stamps off these blocks. So I think this is called a sand dollar. Maybe it's a sea anemone. I'm going to just need a couple of smaller blocks. One for the starfish and one for the piece of seaweed, and one for the tiny shell. So I'll go and use a really small block for the tiny shell. Okay, so I'm going to actually stamp in colour, and the colours I'm going to choose to use are, let me have a look, soft suede, Rococo Rose, Sahara Sand and Old Olive. So the three colours I've used from my first cards, and then I've just brought in soft suede as well. So I'm going to first of all stamp, and I should also still be using my Stampin' Pierce mat, because again we're photopolymer and we want to have that extra bit of cushioning. So first of all I'm going to stamp the sand dollar / sea anemone, whatever it might be, in Sahara Sand. And then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use one of our stamping blends, or blender pens. So these are a pen that has a clear, I want to call it ink, but it has a clear liquid inside, and that allows us to smudge or bring the ink around. Now this one is not smudging, this ink has dried really quickly because it's quite warm in my craft room. So what I'm going to do is pick up some ink from the ink pad, and I've already squished some inside, and I'm just going to blend. I'm going to start around the edge and just blend that around the edge. It's a softer way of adding a bit of tone, a softer way from using our full Stampin' Right markers. And I'm just running around the edge just to kind of make this look a little bit more three-dimensional. I'm going to actually add some colour to those shapes in the middle. Not sure whether this is a sand dollar, so anybody can correct me or suggest what this image is. I'm pretty sure in America they call it a sand dollar, but I'm not sure what we call it in the UK. Now when I've finished using the blender pen, I give it a scribble on some scrap, and that just removes any residue of ink. So that's that colour. I'm going to stamp my starfish. I nearly said seahorse, don't know where my brain is. Starfish in Rococo Rose. I've got some smudges on my cardstock, but I'm just ignoring them because we're going to die cut these pieces. So again I'm going to come in with my blending pen and just see if it will smudge the ink. And ordinarily it would just smudge the ink quite well. I'm taking care not to scribble too much, because again we're using basic white ink, basic white cardstock, which is not designed to take much water or watery colour. So by scribbling you may well bobble the cardstock. So I'm just taking some ink using the blender pen. And I'm just adding that little bit of colour. So it's not really a colouring in technique, it's just adding a little bit of colour to add a bit more dimension. And you don't have to be an artist to be able to do that. These blender pens again are a good addition to your craft room. I'm going to stamp 3 pieces of seaweed using Old Olive, and I'm going to stamp 2 at full strength and then 1 second generation, or we might call it stamped off, just to get a paler image. And again I'll use the blender pen, and this time my Old Olive ink pad is really juicy. So I hope you can see that that's actually colouring in the seaweed, and it's such a quick technique. You're not messing around with any shading or anything fancy. It's literally smudging the ink. There we go. And it just stops that image from having that stark whiteness to it. And the last little image, I'm going to use soft suede, just a slightly darker shade of brown for this tiny clamshell. And I've just got enough clean cardstock there. This time the blending's worked, because again this ink pad is very juicy, so the ink hasn't dried very quickly. So while the ink is still wet, you use the blender pen just to pull the ink in, the ink from the line image into the centre, and you can give your image just a little hint of colour. Now this is very useful if you've got sepia tone stamps. So we have a beautiful stamp set in the January to June catalogue at the moment, mini catalogue at the moment, with aeroplanes and a balloon. You may have seen it. It's beautiful for stamping in shades of Sahara sand or soft suede or crumb cake. Just going over with a blender pen, you get those sepia toned images, so it's really clever. Well worth investing in a pack of those blender pens. Very versatile. So I'm going to die cut these images, and this time I'm going to use my mini machine because it's small, perfectly formed. And let's get those dies. Has anybody seen the dies? Oh, are they here? Let's have a look. So I'm going to use starfish, sand dollar, and just this one here for the seaweed. Now I am going to have to go through a couple of times with the seaweed, so I do apologise if that's a bit boring to watch me go through a couple of times, but for the first run through, I'm going to be careful positioning these and hope that they behave and stay where they're meant to be. Let's go for this one. Now a tip if you've got the mini machine is to stagger your plates a little bit. So what I mean by that is have plate number 1 on the bottom, pull back plate number 2 to leave this lip, and then pop plate number 2, the second plate number 2 on top. Being very careful because these may well jump, and what that does is that allows it to feed into the machine just a little bit easier. But I'm keeping a nip with my left hand just because I don't want the pieces to jump. I've just seen that this one's jumped here. I'm going to leave it just for speed and for demonstration purposes. And the reason it's jumped is as you start to wind, it can sometimes just move the pieces. Now I've finished with those, so I'll pop them back on my magnetic sheet so I don't lose them. And I've got my images here, and we'll just run through. We'll try and be quick because I know it's lunch break time. So some of you may be working and watching in your lunch break and need to get back. Some of you may not. Let's see if I can get this to run through. Let me just just dabby those plates a bit. Ooh. More haste, less speed. I absolutely love my mini machine. It's so light and portable, and I'm looking forward to the moment, I think it's the 17th of May, when we're allowed to have overnight stays in self-contained accommodation, also known in my house as a caravan, because I think my mini machine is going to be perfect for taking to the caravan, taking away with us in our caravan, not taking up too much space. There we go. So I've now got all my bits and pieces I need. And I do want another die set, so I'm just going to reach behind me and get my other die set. Sorry about that, I'm not prepared. Oh, let me just get my... Oh, goodness me. Oh, there, good, it was right at the front. Stitched with Whimsy dies. I love these dies so much, and I was so delighted to see that they are indeed going to be in our new annual catalogue. And I'm just going to pop this Stitched with Whimsy die through the mini machine really quickly. It just adds that row of faux stitching. I just think it looks adorable, and it just gives another dimension to the cards, to your layers. It doesn't actually cut the shape, it just adds the layer of stitching, or the row of stitching, faux stitching, around the edge of your already pre-cut square. If you remember, this was 7 by 7 centimetres, and I've just run that round. And I need one more stamp from the stamp set, which is this little image of dots, just to give me some background texture. And I'm just going to have to steal a block now. I'm running out of blocks, so let's just take the starfish off. And I'm going to bring back my scrap pad, and I'm going to use Sahara sand, and I'm going to stamp off, stamp on, stamp off, turn my block, stamp on, stamp off, turn my block again, and stamp on, and just adding a bit of additional interest to that background and stop it from looking very pale and empty. So now we can start to build the card. I do have to emboss this layer, and I'm going to add even more texture by ripping this vellum, which is what I'm going to do first. So I'm going to simply use my fingernail and my thumb, and I'm going to tear all the way around, just taking my time. What I love about tearing vellum is you get this lovely exposed edge that looks white. Oh, excuse me, one moment, somebody really important's just coming to the door. He's called Mr. Brown and he's bringing me an order. I'll be right back, don't go anywhere. Hello, Mr. Brown. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. How exciting. I do apologise, but when Mr. Brown comes with an exciting package live on air, one has to not be rude and go and answer the door. And I can tell you, while I get comfy again and carry on ripping, that in that package is another new catalogue and a brand new stamp set from the new catalogue that has been delivered to me because I have registered to attend an online demonstrator training event on the 10th of April. How exciting! I can't tell you anything about the stamp set, I can't show you it, but I can tell you it's absolutely beautiful and it's right up my street. Maybe I could give a tiny bit of a clue and say if it wasn't up my street, it would be in my garden. And that is as much as I am saying. Now I'm going to emboss this layer using this embossing folder, and I've forgotten the name because I'm so excited that Mr. Brown's just been. It is the... I'm going to give somebody some homework to find the name of it. Oh yes, Helen's has just arrived, and it is a sand dollar. So Helen or Alison, what's this embossing folder called? Thank you. While I emboss. It's one of my favourites. So hinge forward and layers 1 and platform plates 1 and 4. Let's see if anyone's going to find it for me. I'm sure Alison will be quick to the rescue. Oh. I can tell you which one is retiring, and it's another one of my favourites, and it's the subtle embossing folder is going to be retiring, so I'm ever so sad about that. If you love this embossing folder, I suggest that you grab it before it goes. But this is my second favourite for just a subtle textured background, and I can't remember what it's called. So for the background, I wanted a kind of vintagey distressed look, so I'm going to curl one corner, really simple, just roll it between my thumb and forefinger just to break down the fibres. So if you just get it started and keep rolling it, and you can go as mad as you like with this, you can go as much as you like or as little, and I'll just start the bottom opposite corner as well. And it just gives that a nice sort of texture, and then I'm going to stick my vellum on top. So let's go ahead now. We've got all of our components except the sentiment, and we'll just go ahead and assemble this card. So some multi-purpose liquid glue, Tombow to you and I on that layer. And for once, we're not puzzled about how to stick vellum on, because for the majority of this layer you're not seeing it, so we can actually go ahead and use multi-purpose liquid glue in the middle, because often that is a bit of a conundrum, how to stick vellum down without being able to see the glue. Well, for this one we don't mind, and we can curl the vellum if we want as well, give that a bit of a curl. Just really like this ripped effect. It just, I don't know, for me it just appeals to me. I quite like the distressed look on cards. So now we've got our layers glued down, and what I'm going to then do is build the image layer. So I'm going to start with my gold hoop, and I'm going to go in with some glue dots. That was another conundrum when these gold hoops first came out, was how to stick them down. And I've discovered my favourite way of sticking them down is using glue dots. So for this corner, I'm going to use a full glue dot just placed on the gold hoop. It's just picked straight up, and I'm going to just place it lightly down. For this corner I'm going to use another glue dot, but I'm actually going to use a tool, like I'm using a very small ball end embossing tool. You could use, let me just have a look, I've got a cocktail stick here. You could use your poker tool, maybe the pointy end of your pick tool, just something that I can pick up the glue dot with. I'm going to see if this is a bit nearer the camera, and all I'm doing with this glue dot is kind of rolling it around and making it thin. So just rolling it into a blob, technically known as a glue bogey. Delightful. And I'm going to stick that glue blob underneath the top right hand side of the hoop. And now I'm going to use my little tool to kind of stretch it. Now this works better when the glue dots are warm. So if you're working in a cold room, you might want to just warm them up. And a good way of warming up your glue dot is to find it on the spool and just hold it with your thumb, warm it up. You could run your heat gun over the top carefully, Don't set anything on fire, just warm it up, and they do behave differently when they're warm to when they're cold. Now what I'm going to do, because some of that glue dot is exposed and I don't want anything catching on it, I'm just going to use my old embossing buddy and just tap. And what that does is the powder will just attach itself, give it a blow, attach itself to the sticky exposed areas and stop it from sort of picking anything else up. It doesn't matter about this one because I'm going to cover that up now with my stamped images. I'm going to first of all attach the sand dollar, and I'm going to go back in and use dimensionals. So here we go for the sand dollar. Pop one there. Let's have a think. This side's more interesting, it's got more interesting imagery going on. So I want to make sure I don't cover that side up with the this starfish. Goodness me. Right, I'm just going to glance at comments. Tasteful textile. Thank you, Helen. You were not struggling. You were absolutely on the money. Thank you. So let me continue just sticking some of these images down. So the embossing folder that I've just used, Tasteful Textiles, is carrying over to the new catalogue, new annual. So if you love this one, fear not, you will be able to get it for over another year. However, if you like the subtle embossing folder and still haven't got it, now's your chance. Now you'll notice that I'm sticking all of these images on with dimensionals because we actually have the hoop, which is giving us a rim, and I actually want to stick them sort of flat against the rim. I'm not happy about that starfish at the moment, he's just standing up, so I'm going to pop a blob of liquid glue just behind and just stick that down. That's just holding it down a little bit better, happier with that. And then we'll finish off with a bit of liquid glue on these bits of seaweed, just finishing off some layers there. Let's layer that up. And because this gold hoop is not stuck down all the way, you can poke the seaweed underneath the gold hoop. Let's just pop those a bit closer together. There we are. Give that a press down. Now all we need is a quick sentiment, and as we've got hello somewhere, where did I put my hello? On one of these blocks over here. Wow, it's disappeared. Oh, here it is. My hello, and I've got a little scrap of white. Oh no, not hello, thank you. What am I talking about? So I'm going to go back to soft suede. Stamp a little thank you. And really quickly I'm going to use some big snips, and I'm going to just trim it down. Steady hand and a committed eye. Just tip when you're cutting something long and straight is to look where your scissors are going, not where they are coming from. That just helps your eye to steady. And I can pop that underneath that shell. That just needs to be a tiny bit shorter. And I'm going to pop a little blob of a little dot of Tombow on each end, just where it's going to make contact with the cardstock, and we will stick a fork in it and call it done. Oh, with the exception of, on this card, you probably can't see, but I used my shimmery crystal effects, and I just put 3 little blobs on, and when I just hold it in the light I can see those blobs. However, I want to just share with you a little tip. This shimmery crystal effects is really useful for making your own bling. So I used this is just a silicone mat, any old silicone mat will do. We do have a Stampin' Up silicone mat, I like the black one because I can actually see things a bit easier on the black one. So I'm just going to squeeze out some shimmery crystal effects onto the mat into a blob. And I did 6 blobs the other night, well last night actually, and let it dry overnight. Now I don't know how long it actually needs to dry, and this is the result of those blobs when they're dry. I'm going to just get my take your pick tool and lift them off. So you can see I've actually got shimmery, you probably can't see on the camera. I'll try and just pop one on to some coloured cardstock and hold it right near the camera. But you get these little blobs of shimmery epoxy, which I'm now going to stick onto my little square card using a dot of glue. And you can use Tombow. So this is the new card that I've just made. You could use Tombow or you could use our fine tip glue. I'm going to use the fine tip glue, and I'm just going to pop 3 of these on. 1, 2, maybe a third one down here. I'll just take my time to pop my needle back in the... One of the reasons I don't demonstrate my fine tip glue very often is because you do have to take your time to put the cap back on immediately, and it has a little needle. So I'm just going to use my take your pick tool and just lift these little blobs that I've made and stick them onto the card. And they show up really quite nicely. I'm really pleased with them. Make your own shimmery dots. There you go. And by doing them on the, let me just see if I can catch the light. Actually, Alison, the fine tip glue is not retiring. The fine tip glue is going to still be available. I think they actually made a boob and forgot to put it in the catalogue, because there was an email, a demonstrator update that said, don't panic, the fine tip glue is still available. This is the code number for online ordering. So there you go. A happy correction, I hope. So yes, the little blobs are really interesting. So that was the sort of size of blob, and just leave them to dry on your silicone mat. When they've dried, you just pick them off using the spatula end of your take your pick tool and pop them carefully. Now, because they're loose and they don't have any adhesive on the back, pop them carefully in something like a little container until you're ready to use them. And then they adhere really well with that fine tip glue. I'm just going to, before we finish, clear away this desktop, and I'm just going to lay these cards out like this for a brief moment, because that's helpful. When I'm uploading my video, it helps me to have a really nice thumbnail to actually upload for the cover. So let's just leave them like that for a moment. But then I'm going to grab my pile of show and tell, because I've got such a lovely haul of things I want to show you. If you can spare the time, just an extra 5 minutes, I want to show you all the beautiful cards that I received for my birthday, handcrafted. So let me move these to one side. So the first card I received handmade was from Andrew's sister Susan. Susan is in her 60s and has learning disabilities, but she loves crafting, and this made my heart sing. She loves to use stickers, and she loves to use stickers on the inside, and she's finally found her confidence in writing. Now, this writing to me says, to Isabel, love from Susan. And I know that she's not got all the right letters, all in the right order, but to me, it makes my heart sing that she has put her pen in her hand and had a go at writing, and she's used the letters that she's familiar with, and I'm just so in love with this card. So that was, I think I'm just going to have a favourite, and that was my favourite card, handmade. So many others that I can't possibly choose another favourite. But here's one from Linda, and she's used the Celebration stamp set. Here's one from Nicola, using the Butterfly Brilliance set. Here's a gorgeous card, and this one was from my mum, actually. She hasn't signed it inside, but she signed a really funny piece of paper, and it just made me laugh. So, I'm glad you were born. And inside, she put a really funny piece of paper, a little cartoon that said, because I'd be in a right mess if you hadn't have been. And it was a picture of my mum, all fat and still pregnant after 53 years. That was so funny. And I love how she's done the blue tits hanging upside down. And here is a card from Lorna, Adrian and Matt. And it was Lorna who made me a beautiful hanging heart, and I'm going to show you another thing that Lorna made me as well in a moment. This is a beautiful card from Helen, and if you love this vellum butterfly and this shimmery effect, hop across to Handmade with Helen. There's a link in the Crafty Bees Beehive, the Crafty Beehive, to Helen's Facebook Live last week where she demonstrated how to do these fabulous butterflies. Beautiful pocket card from my best friend Alison. Just gorgeous. Look at this, a pocket card. That's a fancy fold I always forget about. So thank you for the reminder, because I really need to do a pocket card now. Super dupes. Love it. Thank you. And here's a 3D card, and it's one of the box cards from a friend Beth. Now here's a handmade card that isn't Stampin' Up, and this is from my very talented stepsister Tracy. She's an incredibly talented crafter who does lots of mixed media projects as well. Now who's this one from? Oh, from Brenda. Hi, and Brenda's watching. Thank you, Brenda. Gorgeous card. Just look. I love these pierced blooms. These are in the January to June mini. Beautiful. I love just the detail. I love the little tiny bits of glimmer. Just sometimes the devil's in the detail, and that really is gorgeous. It really sets that card off. Now who's this one from? This is from Carol, who also knows that I'm a bird fanatic. And I love how these birds are on the branch as well. So we've mixed two different stamp sets and they go really, really well. And I love that the sun's shining on my birthday. It's just gorgeous. Now this was a special commission. Here we go. Here is a card, handmade from my husband, not by my husband, but my husband very cleverly commissioned the very talented Alison Langford to make me a handmade card for my birthday. So clever. And who's this one from? This is from Pam. So this one arrived all the way from America, from Pam Irwin. Thank you, Pam. And Donna made this gorgeous card. And this uses the Sand and Sea die all in one piece, which is just beautiful. And look how different that is, coloured in different colours. Really, really different. And who made this one? Oh, from Kath. Really pretty. I love the colours on this. Really love the colours on that. And this one's from Ginny. She's nailed it. That's so lovely. I love that fancy fold as well. And I love this set. And sadly this set, if you love this set too, this set is not going to be carried over into the new annual catalogue. So if you love this set too, grab it now. And I want to just share with you this project that Lorna made. So this is an explosion box. If you've not seen one of these before, here's a treat. So you take the lid off the box and the sides all fall down. And she made me an Izzy's Woodland Walks explosion box. So clever. She's taken all of my photos from Facebook or Instagram, printed them and put them in this, and she's done this most gorgeous handwriting. Put them in this explosion box. Just look at this. It's so wonderful. I cried when I opened this. Just gorgeous. Because not only is it beautifully handmade and really well thought through and just absolutely gorgeous. It's such a lovely reminder because I post a lot of nature photographs and then rarely go back to them and revisit them and look at them and sort of keep the memory going, really. So that was that. And I wanted to show you this. The last thing from my birthday that was handmade was this gorgeous decorated wrapping paper. And this was from Alison. And she made these little roses like a quilling technique. It's lovely. Thank you, Alison. So there are my show and tells from my birthday. One last thing that was just on my mind that I forgot to show you. Just before we go, really quickly show you the designer series paper from the Sand and Sea suite. So I'm just going to very quickly fan through the designer series paper. So you get 2 sheets of each and they're double-sided. So on the reverse side of this one is like a sand textured neutral background. So we get the sand dollar, sea anemones in different colours, and on the reverse side this blue blotchy background. I love these blotchy backgrounds personally. I like this one. Reminds me of sand and maybe sky. And this one has starfish in So Saffron. This one looks like waves on the shore. And some more. So it's quite a subtle, it's not what I would call an in-your-face designer series paper. It's quite a nice subtle, so it's going to be very useful for backgrounds. This is just beautiful, look at the colours. And what's on the other side of this one is just a collection in that lovely Rococo Rose Pink. And the last one, really useful, those blue waves, and then just some lines of very pretty dots. So a very useful collection of designer series paper, I think. The colours are lovely, going to be really useful to use the non-pattern side as well as the pattern side, because I find the patterns are not too in your face. Maybe this one, the biggest one, and I am wondering if that works with the dies. I don't think it will do, but I could be wrong. I think I am wrong. It doesn't work with the dies, but I'm wondering if it works. One of them must work with the dies. I'm wondering if the smaller dies work. I'm not sure. Let's just have a really quick look. I have buried everything underneath. Oh, wrong side. I'm sorry, I'm keeping you all. Let me have a look at one of these. I just want you to know before you disappear if any of these do actually work with the dies, but I'm thinking now that they don't. This one might do. I think this one might do. This large sand dollar, but I'm not sure if any of the others do. It seems to be something that Stampin' Up are doing, is making the DSPs work with dies as well. So, without further ado, I'm going to just pop that to one side and spin the camera around and say goodbye very quickly. And just bear with me as I just flip round. Here I am. Thank you for watching as always. I've nothing much else to finish off with other than I've given you lots of information to be thinking about in terms of retiring products. So if you visit my online shop and you see the link to the last chance products, please have a look and make sure you're not going to miss a favourite product before it's gone forever. If you've got any questions or you want to ask quickly about a product, you're struggling to find something on the shop, then please drop me a message and I will endeavour to help you out. I'll be placing another order fairly soon because I'm planning another class in the post pretty soon. I haven't got a set date, and I'm finding that being able to do the class in the post with a video make along is working really well for me. So no set dates allows me to be a bit flexible. I need to design the class. It's going to be using a stamp set that will be retiring so that I can give you an opportunity to purchase it or use it if you've already got it before it goes forever. But I haven't quite decided. I've got a short list of 3. So watch this space, keep in touch with my social media, Instagram and Facebook, for updates. I'll be uploading this video from Facebook Live now to YouTube. So if you're watching on catch up on YouTube and you haven't done already, please do click subscribe in the link below. Subscribing to my channel doesn't cost you anything or tie you into anything. It merely gives you a pop-up reminder of when a new video has been posted. You then have the option to watch it later or watch it there and then. But what it does do in a very positive way is enable YouTube to remain free to point of view and free at point of use. So thank you again for watching, and I look forward to seeing you all again next week when I have another live at lunchtime. Stay safe, stay stamping and crafting, but please enjoy the sunshine. It's amazing. It just is such a mood lifter and it's wonderful. So happy crafting. Bye for now.